Welcome to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. It is the question and answer podcast week. Chuck is in the background showing me the ultimate guide to HR checklist edition.
Yes.
And so he's going to answer the questions with a little help today. He felt like I need some help, so he pulled up the book and he's going to use it. All right, Chuck, how are you today?
Fantastic. Eager to do another Q&A segment for our listeners, which are steadily growing. I'm very excited. We've hit some real milestones. So I want to thank everyone. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment as you can. We're on a number of platforms, and it's just great to hear from everyone and to see that we're having an impact out there in the HR realm and leadership realm too, because you are a leadership coach.
I'm a leadership guru, I've decided today.
Okay.
I got in a little discussion on a community board, one of those Facebook boards, not ours, somebody else's. Anyway, one of the other things that I would also encourage everyone is ask us questions, right? So you can you'll see a link in the text box in our description in there, or you can email us at team@hrstories.com. You can definitely do that as well. So that's our newest email. So definitely download that and reach out, ask us questions. We will answer those questions off air, sometimes on air. But if you don't want to do it on air, you're like, hey, this is really confidential. Feel free to just ask us and we'll do our best to answer it to get it out there anyway. So Chuck, are you ready for our 3 questions today? We got some doozies today.
Yeah, and a lot of these are from our HR Team of One Facebook page, which is a free Facebook page, HR Helping HR. So yeah, John, let's hit it.
All right. So now we're going to talk about the manufacturing industry. And so this individual, our listener, emailed us and said, what about attendance? So they have a key employee in the manufacturing. He works as a welder, and he's only worked about 6 days in the last two-week payroll period, and will intermittently call stating that he's at the Mayo Clinic or the hospital. However, when pushed, he never presents any documentations. The owners of the business, again, small company, are aware of his illness. It is heart related, and now they want to term him and hire someone who, quote unquote, who can show up and do the work. Now, when this individual, this key employee, is there, he's great. He's fantastic. They have offered him intermittent FMLA, but he's never turned over the paperwork. So it's one of those situations, Chuck, where you want to do the right thing, but the employee is not helping you. And so what do you do? How do you handle these situations?
Yeah. So when I look at this, and I'm going to guess because they offered intermittent FMLA, they're an FMLA eligible type employer, correct? Yep. So, and if this person has been there for a year, worked 1,250 more hours, then he's eligible for FMLA. So there's got to be more to this other than he's in a 2-week pay period. I'm just going to guess it's 10 days. So he's only missed 4 days. That's the way I look at it. It's 4 days. And that's not, it's not unusual. Yeah, it's a lot, but it's not unusual for someone to have an illness and be sick and miss 4 days. So I'm looking at this where it says the owners are aware of his illness. So other things might have happened over the last couple of weeks or months or years, so maybe he has been calling in more frequently. So this is a trap that I've seen other HR departments fall into, managers. So the first time someone is sick, the first time they have a situation, the first time they're out for a few days, no one wants to you need to bring in a doctor's note. You need to, because they want to be nice.
Right.
They want to be nice. They don't want the person to, don't worry about it, this and that. So I'm going to guess that this is something that's been going on for a while, but only now are they getting, quote, fed up type of thing.
Yeah.
So how I would handle it, and once again, depends on the state
Right.
law, state FMLA, is I would, I would document the conversation. Hey, look, you have got to bring in, these, in order for these to be excused absences, or, you need to bring in the notes. So I would document that. I would give him the FMLA paperwork. I would send it to them. Different companies have different methods. Some still do it the old fashioned way, which I've done. Print out the government forms, get them, fill them out, send them registered mail, and go. And then document that. If the person still fails to turn in any of that paperwork, then they're not covered by FMLA. I believe it's, and I'd have to, look at our book here, but I believe you have 30 days, or there's a certain time period. It may be
days.
less. Yeah, 15 days. 15 days to get that paperwork back. So that's how I would do it. I would play it by the book on this one.
Do you think ADA would go into this? Because my assumption is this person, if they truly have a serious health condition, which, right, they don't really know, they think they know, but they don't really know, would play into this, where then it may be necessary. They may get, when they're gathering information, maybe they get information that says, look, this person can only work 6 days in a 2-week period.
Yeah. And it could, but I don't know if I would go right away and say, do you need an accommodation? Is there a reason you can't? I mean, maybe I would, some companies may want to do that to make sure they're completely covered, or maybe they actually care for the person.
Right.
But either way, he's going to have to bring in some sort of doctor's note and documentation. It sounds like for some reason he just doesn't want to do that.
Yeah. And again, there could be a lot of reasons for that. And I think one of the things we as HR professionals and leaders and practitioners and that kind of stuff, we have to follow the documentation trail, right? And so we have to ask them, you need, and if it's not delivered, right? If it's not delivered in the 15 days or, whatever, and we've reached out, we documented, we've reached out numerous times, then you have to move forward with your process. And it's hey, look, you're missing work. There's no FMLA excuse anymore. There's no ADA excuse. I don't have any information. So this means that you're going to be terminated, which may then push them going, all right, I want to tell you something I didn't want to tell you because it's very personal to me, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. Just tell me what I need to know so I can get this on there, right? So
yeah, exactly. Follow the process.
Good.
And it's a pain in the butt, but you got to do it sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it's important, right? And so it's all that documentation. We say it all the time.
Great news for our listeners. The Ultimate Guide to HR, Checklist Edition, your step-by-step reference for avoiding costly mistakes, is now available on Amazon.com. 85 checklists designed to streamline your HR process, from hiring to termination, performance management, to creating a positive work environment. So go to Amazon.com, look for the Ultimate Guide to HR, and start getting HR right.
Okay, question number 2. This question's a little bit longer, so bear with me as I ask it. So there's an individual working for this company and has had a disability but does not want to talk about it. Let's say it was post-traumatic stress disorder. And so they don't bring it up. They want to leave the past in the past. They want to talk about it. Yet, in their current job, there was a trigger to their post-traumatic stress disorder, and they quit. So let's give you some more information, right? And so that person has PTSD, did not lie on their application resume. Well, again, we know that when somebody's applying for the job, they don't need to tell us they have a disability. She's great. She owned her own business. She was getting back in the HR, blah, blah, blah. She found herself being talked about at the finance department, was called a hot mess. She wasn't the only one being talked about. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The executive director is aware of all this gossip and mess that's going on, but hasn't done anything because, frankly, the people that have been doing it have been doing really good jobs with their work, right? And so, how would you deal with this situation? You have somebody that quit, and you have a department that sounds like maybe they're doing a little bit bullying in there, if I'm reading in between the lines. How would you handle that situation?
Oh boy. I've seen it handled where a whole department's brought in and they're just reamed out. You did this.
Right.
They left because of you. I saw a GM once do that to a bunch of management. That's a great question. I mean, this is kind of it's not so much a legalese type question. It's more of a leadershipy type of question. And so I would love to know how you might handle it, John.
Yeah, no, thank you for throwing that my way. I was just seeing because I did respond to this. Wait, I'm just looking to see what I responded to the person. So I guess I didn't respond. Yeah, and I think, again, it's a question, right? And so we should be doing exit interviews, right? And so if this person left because they were triggered, I would like to know more. Was it just something that their disease was being triggered by, right? And so they're like, I just can't work here. And then I'm going to want to work through that ADA. Well, before you leave, let's see if there's something we could do from the ADA point. But if then they point out, well, I'm being talked about behind my back and other people are, and no one's doing anything about it, and I don't feel like I'm supported in this workplace, right? Now, this is great exit interview information. You may not be able to save that employee from leaving, right? You want to, but you may not be able to. And so now you have to go back and still, I would do an investigation. I would want to know why people are leaving this role. I want to know. And if it is somebody that's toxic in the work environment, but still good at their job, now I need to have a conversation. What's more important?
Yeah.
And for me, every single time, it's going to be the overall getting rid of the toxic employee. I don't care if they're the star player. Just toxicity will just breed throughout the company, and we're just not going to be productive. We're not going to be effective, right? So I would get rid of, even if they're my star, get rid of them. Aaron Rodgers. So I would just go through that's what I would do.
John, was this the HR? So this person was the HR manager?
Yes, was brought in as the HR manager. So she was the fourth HR manager in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I guess if I'm the executive director, you're right. I'm going to want to try and find out. I'm going to try and look back at patterns. I'm going to look at the previous 3 people that have left, and then go from there. This is kind of a tough question. It's not a lot of info, but the bottom line is you're going to have to do an investigation. Okay. Yeah. And you're going to have to talk to people individually, maybe with a witness behind closed doors, just to really fully understand what's going on and diagnose.
Yeah. And again, we don't know exactly all the details, but the executive director has to know, right? Has to know what's going on and has turned a blind eye because that finance person they think is fantastic, right? And we've all worked with those great employees that are also toxic, right? And so from the executive level or the senior leadership, well, they're great. But when we talk to the people below them, they're like, oh, they're a terrible manager. They yell at us. They do all these things. And then we have to decide as a company, what do we want to stand for? Why do we have these values? And what happens is when we stand behind the good employee, the excellent subject matter expert, and we don't stand behind our values, then our values are useless.
Yeah. John, I want to just real quick go back to the first part of this is if a person does not discuss a disability such as PTSD, they chose not to bring it up and then something triggers them and they quit. The company is not, and I don't know where they were going with this, but the company is not responsible if someone had some sort of disability, they didn't bring it up, and then they quit.
That's good insight. Question number 3. All right. what is the legal way to get company funds back from unauthorized expenses? So in this case, the employee charges item to room services, which the company is then being charged for, right? So the company has put their credit card down for the room and any expenses with that room, and the company and the employee, and I'm throwing this out. Maybe they get a bottle of booze from the guest thing, or maybe they charge massage there. And it's so funny because this just appeared in our HR community of one Facebook page. There was somebody was talking about a CEO that was at a conference but brought their family to the conference and then stayed a couple days later for the vacation and charged the two rooms the day after to the thing. And she was like, how do I deal with that? How do I have that conversation with the CEO? So little different situation, but how do we deal with these individuals that are basically stealing from the company? Let's be honest. How do we deal with that? How do we make that whole?
Well, let's start with the policy. Is there a policy? Is there was it rolled out? Is the person aware? Were they trained? That sort of thing. Okay, so the main question here is, what's the best way? The best way would be either, hey, stroke a check, to the company, or we're going to do payroll deduction as long as, it's legal in whatever state you're in and blah, blah, blah. But, instead of going in with this heavy-handed thing, first go, was it a mistake? Was it an error? Did they mean to not charge it to the to the company? Did it did they think they could? I don't know. There's a lot of questions there. And I think you want to have that conversation, and depending on what it was, if they got room service as opposed to walking down and there's their first trip, and you want to say, look, we don't pay for room service. So next time you're on a business trip, you cannot order room service. All right. And then eat it. What's the values? Right. You talk about culture all the time, right? You talk about culture. And if we start nickel and diming folks like that, it becomes it can bring down, it just says a lot about the culture. However, once again, you want to be consistent. So then you have to balance all these things out. So I would say in our favorite HR manner, it depends.
It depends.
It depends.
I was envisioning, this was what I was envisioning. Somebody in the accounting department's going through all the receipts, right? And they're looking at it and that kind of stuff. And they see a charge for room service, right? With alcohol. Oh, they got room service with alcohol. They can't do that. They get up in an uproar. They go to their boss. Their boss goes to the CEO. The CEO goes, deal with this, HR. Now it's in our lap. Everyone's upset about it. Having that conversation with the employee, like Chuck said, is such a great thing. Like, hey, just going through this, we noticed that this was there. Tell me exactly what you were thinking at the time. Well, I was really sick that day and I didn't want to go downstairs, or I didn't feel good. So I got the room service. Oh, okay. That's great. That's fine. Right. So you're building that culture up of like understanding, but these things happen all the time where somebody gets it and gets like, that's against the law, against the policy, blah, blah, blah. And then when you talk to the person, there's a good reason, right? And so I think sometimes using that common sense can be really good. So the
seek first to understand, then to be understood. It might be more appropriate in this case. You never know. Of course, they might have been talking to this person a million times. So then maybe it is a documentation and hey, we're taking it out of your paycheck.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if we think of it as not wage theft, but we think about it as company theft, right? Company property theft. What does your policy say about that? If your policy says that's termination thing, then you probably want to terminate the person. I would have the conversation first. But again, if they've done this a couple times, and then I'd be like, look, you're stealing from the company and you're just going to be fired. Thank you. Goodbye.
All right. Well, great. Those are great questions. John, how do you want to wrap it up for our listeners today?
I don't have any big wrap up today, but here's the thing, and I'm going to mention this in our next recording of our next podcast, but I want you all take a deep breath, For 2025, you can let it out, Chuck. You that was great. You will have to pay attention, listen to us, come back to us, because there's just so much going on that I think we need to be paying attention to that. So Chuck and I are going to do our best to pay attention to it and bring it to you on the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. But you guys need to do that as well. And definitely ask questions as you're like, oh, what's going on with this? Tell us more. We'll do quick episodes. We'll drop that in there. We'll do some shorts around it.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.